Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
Konrad Lorenz, 1935 monograph, Der Kumpan in der Umwelt des Vogels, represents a foundational moment in the development of classical ethology. This work, translated as The Companion in the Bird's World, extends beyond simple observation to construct a sophisticated theoretical architecture for understanding innate social behavior. It achieves this by synthesizing Jakob von Uexküll's concept of the Umwelt, the species-specific perceptual world, with meticulous, if sometimes anecdotal, observations of avian life. The essay that follows undertakes a direct and systematic evaluation of the core claims, mechanisms, and evidentiary foundations presented within Lorenz's seminal paper. The analysis will proceed through the logical stages of Lorenz's argument, examining the internal coherence and empirical grounding of his propositions, thereby illuminating the work's profound contribution to the biological sciences and its enduring intellectual legacy. The objective is a deep, critical appraisal of the text on its own terms, assessing the structure of its reasoning and the power of its central theses as they were originally articulated. Section 1. The conceptual framework of Umwelt and Kumpan. Lorenz initiates his argument by establishing a critical conceptual distinction derived from Uexküll. He posits that the world of the animal, its Umwelt, is composed of a limited set of meaningful stimuli filtered from the vast chaos of the physical environment. The Umgebung. The paper's primary claim in this introductory section is that social behaviors in birds are elicited not by the holistic reality of another animal, but by a specific, simplified set of perceptual cues, which collectively constitute the functional entity of the Kumpan, or companion. The Kumpan is therefore a theoretical construct, an element of the bird's subjective world. It is the carrier of sign stimuli, or releases, that activate innate behavioral programs. In evaluating this claim, one perceives its immense organizational power. It refrains the study of social interaction from a complex, potentially inscrutable dynamic into a manageable scientific problem focused on identifying specific triggers and their corresponding responses. The evidence presented here is largely conceptual, a logical assertion that for behavior to be innate and species-typical, its releasing mechanism must be keyed to simple, unambiguous signals. The strength of this section lies in its theoretical clarity and its establishment of a powerful analytical vocabulary. It provides the intellectual scaffolding for all subsequent claims by defining the Kumpan as a functional, perceptual object within the bird's world, a move that allows behavior to be studied with the same rigor as anatomy. Section 2. The innate releasing mechanism and sign stimuli. Building upon the concept of the Kumpan, Lorenz next elaborates on the specific mechanisms through which it operates. The central argument of this portion of the paper is that specific, often surprisingly simple, features of the companion act as key stimuli, or sign stimuli, which unlock a preprogrammed behavioral sequence via an Angebrens or Schlessen's schema, or innate releasing mechanism. Lorenz provides empirical substance for this claim through observations of various bird species. He describes how the red spot on a herring gull's beak is the exclusive feature that releases the chick's begging response, a pecking motion directed at the spot. Other features of the parent, such as its shape, sound, or size, are presented as largely relevant to this particular action. Similarly, he details how the escape response of young turkeys is triggered by the silhouette of a bird of prey, specifically a shape with a short neck, which he famously demonstrated using a hawk-goose dummy. The evaluation of these claims reveals both the brilliance and the potential limitations of his method. The identification of such simple releases was a revolutionary insight, suggesting that complex behaviors could be governed by elegantly simple rules. The evidence, derived from careful observation and clever, low-technology experiments, is persuasive in its context. A critique from a modern perspective would highlight the need for more extensive controls and quantitative data. Within the paper's own logic, however, the argument is coherent. Lorenz effectively demonstrates that for certain fixed action patterns, the Kumpan is reducible to a caricature, a collection of essential sign stimuli that have evolutionarily selected for their clarity and reliability in triggering a vital, adaptive response. Section 3. The phenomenon of imprinting or pregon. This section of the monograph introduces what is arguably Lorenz's most famous contribution, the concept of pregon, or imprinting. The core claim is that for a specific class of social behaviours, particularly the following response of precocial birds like geese and ducks, the object of the behaviour is acquired through a unique learning process that occurs during a brief, early, and sensitive period. Lorenz posits that this process is distinct from conventional associative learning. He characterises imprinting by several key features. It occurs during a critical period, its effects are irreversible, and it determines social preferences long into adulthood, including species identification and mate selection. His evidence is vivid and deeply personal, drawn from his experiences hand-rearing grey-lag geese. He recounts how goslings, deprived of their biological mother, would instead form an unbreakable bond with the first large, moving object they consistently encountered, which was often Lorenz himself. These goslings would follow him, direct their contentment calls toward him, and show distress in his absence. Evaluating this claim requires acknowledging the narrative power of the evidence. The image of goslings faithfully trailing a human caretaker provides a compelling illustration of the concept. The paper presents this anecdotal evidence as a demonstration of a fundamental biological principle. The assertion of irreversibility is central to his argument, and he supports it by noting that his imprinted geese, upon reaching maturity, would direct their courtship rituals toward him, spurning available members of their own species. The analytical contribution. Here his immense Lorenz carves out a new category of behavioural acquisition, one that sits at the intersection of instinct and experience, where an innate readiness to learn is fulfilled by a singular environmental event. Section 4. The object of imprinting and its conceptual flexibility. Lorenz proceeds to refine the concept of imprinting by exploring the properties of the object that elicits the response. The paper's claim here is that while the act of imprinting is a rigid, innate process, the object of imprinting is remarkably flexible. The innate mechanism in the goslin is not tuned to a mother goose but to a far more general set of stimuli, an object of a certain size that moves and, ideally, vocalizes. This explains his own success as a surrogate parent and the ability of goslings to imprint on inanimate objects, such as a coloured ball, if it is the first salient moving thing they encounter. This conceptual move is crucial. It separates the innate behavioural program from the specific environmental content that completes it. The evidence he musters includes these very examples of unnatural imprinting. He presents these mistakes of nature not as aberrations but as powerful natural experiments that reveal the underlying rules of the system. An evaluation of this argument shows Lorenz at his most insightful as a theoretician. He uses apparent behavioural errors to illuminate the beautiful simplicity of the evolved mechanism. A gosling in the wild almost invariably encounters its mother first, so a simple imprint on the first moving object rule is evolutionarily robust. His claim that the system is built for efficiency, trading specificity for speed and certainty in a typical environment, is a cornerstone of ethological thought. The paper successfully argues that the Kumpan for the following response is initially a blank slate, defined only by broad perceptual parameters, waiting to be filled in by the first qualifying candidate in the young bird's Section 5. The extension of the Kumpan to adult social life, having established the mechanisms of imprinting in infancy. Lorenz extends his analysis of the Kumpan to the full life cycle of the bird. The central thesis of this part of the work is that the imprinted companion of infancy becomes the template for adult social bonds. Most significantly in mate selection, he argues The object imprinted upon dictates the species with which the bird will attempt to pair and mate. This evidence, once again, comes from his long-term observations of handreared birds. He describes male jackdaws that had imprinted on him attempting to feed him regurgitated worms, a key courtship behaviour, and showing aggression toward other humans who approached him. A female goose imprinted on him performed the species-typical triumph ceremony with him as her partner. In evaluating this claim, the long-term nature of his observations lends his argument significant weight. He is proposing a causal chain that stretches from a brief window in the first hours of life to the most critical reproductive behaviours of adulthood. This was a profound and novel claim, linking early experience to adult fitness in a direct, mechanistic way. The argument powerfully suggests that species recognition is not entirely an innate given but is finalized through this early imprinting event. The Kumpan, therefore, evolves within the bird's lifetime. It begins as the releaser of filial behavior and transforms into the releaser of sexual and pair-bonding behavior. Lorenz's framework here provides a compelling, if unsettling, portrait of behavioral determinism, where a singular, almost accidental, event in infancy could channel the entire trajectory of an animal's social and reproductive life. Section 6. The Kumpan, in species with extended parental care. Lorenz refines his model by examining species where the young are altricial, born helpless and cared for in the nest, contrasting them with the precocial species that are the primary focus of his imprinting studies. The argument in this segment posits that in species like songbirds, the concept of the Kumpan and the mechanisms of its recognition are different. He claims that in these birds, species recognition and the prevention of misimprinting are ensured by the parents who selectively feed only their own young. The innate releasing mechanism for the gaping response in a nestling is keyed to very general stimuli, such as the jarring of the nest or a shadow falling over it. The parents, however, possess a more finely tuned recognition system for their offspring. Lorenz's evaluation of this dynamic leads to the claim that the Kumpan relationship is a two-way street, with different releasing mechanisms operating in the parent and the offspring. His evidence is drawn from observations of nesting birds and the well-documented phenomenon of brood parasitism by cuckoos. The cuckoo chick exploits the simple, general releaser of the host parents' feeding behaviour a wide, colourful gape while the host parents fail to recognise the chick as an interloper. This supports his claim that the parental recognition Kumpan is sometimes imperfect. This section adds necessary nuance to his broader theory. It demonstrates that the specific features of the Kumpan and the mechanics of its establishment are themselves subject to evolutionary adaptation, tailored to the unique life history strategy of each species. He effectively argues that there is no single, universal Kumpan, but a variety of Kumpan systems, each evolved to solve the fundamental problems of care, recognition, and socialization within a particular ecological and developmental Section 7 Methodological and philosophical commitments. Throughout the paper, Lorenz's method is as much a part of his argument as his explicit claims. An evaluation of the work's internal logic must therefore consider its methodological and philosophical foundations. The primary claim embedded in his approach is that patient, empathetic observation of animals in semi-natural conditions is a valid and essential tool for generating biological theory. He presents his own deep familiarity with his subjects as a scientific instrument. This qualitative, observational, and often anecdotal style is a deliberate choice offered as a necessary complement to laboratory experimentation. He implicitly argues that the full, rich context of an animal's behaviour can only be appreciated through this immersive method. A critical assessment of this stance reveals its dual nature. The strength is its unparalleled capacity for hypothesis generation. Concepts like imprinting and the Kumpan likely could only have emerged from such holistic and long-term observation. The weakness, by contemporary standards, is the lack of systematic quantification, control groups and statistical analysis. The paper operates on the persuasive power of its narrative and the apparent coherence of its examples. Philosophically, Lorenz what is a robust defense of the biological reality of instinct. He frames his entire inquiry as an effort to dissect behavior into its constituent parts, isolating the innate, phylogenetically inherited components. The paper is a work of comparative anatomy applied to behavior, seeking homologous behavioral patterns across species just as a morphologist would seek homologous bones. This commitment to the innateness of behavioral foundations is the intellectual engine driving the entire analysis of the Kumpan. Conclusion. In final evaluation, Konrad Lorenz, Der Kumpan in der Umwelt des Vogels, stands as a work of monumental conceptual synthesis. Its enduring significance arises from the clarity and power of the theoretical framework it constructed. By wedding Vogels' Umwelt to observable behavior, Lorenz formulated a new vocabulary and a new set of questions for biology. The paper's central claims that the companion is a functional, perceptual entity, defined by simple sign stimuli, that these stimuli trigger innate releasing mechanisms, and that the object of social behavior is fixed by an irreversible imprinting process collectively created the field of classical ethology. The evaluation of its internal arguments reveals a consistent and coherent intellectual architecture, while each concept builds logically upon the last. The evidence presented, while often anecdotal and qualitative, is used with remarkable effectiveness to illustrate and support his theoretical propositions. The paper's greatest contribution was its demonstration that the complex tapestry of animal social life could be unraveled into discrete, understandable, and evolutionarily significant threads. It established instinct as a legitimate object of rigorous scientific inquiry and provided, in the Kumpan, a powerful analytical tool for understanding how an animal's subjective world shapes its most fundamental actions. The work's genius lies less in the unassailable proof of every claim and more in the profound and generative quality of the questions it raised and the paradigm it so brilliantly articulated.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.